Story RH, the podcast that makes a long story short.
Welcome to all.
History is made of stories.
In this episode, we'll be talking about living together and getting along in a society. And we'll be also looking at the other side of things, people's tendency to withdraw and turn inward.
The more of us there are, the harder it can seem for all of us to get along. It sometimes feels like the world is coming apart at the seams. Those who are for clash with those who are against. Meanwhile, those on the fence end up raising their voices just to make themselves heard.
But harmony doesn't just come down to how many people are involved. So, what's the story?
When you look at our wealthy, comfortable Western societies, which we'll be using as our example, there are a number of characteristics that help explain the seemingly impossible challenge of living together.
The first is hedonism, making the pursuit of pleasure and self-indulgence the end goal in life. There's nothing new about that. But today's rampant consumerism has pushed it to new heights. It's getting harder to quench the thirst.
The problem has been compounded by a series of ever bigger global crises. 9/11, the 2008 financial crisis, the 2020 COVID-19 pandemic.
All of these crises have made us more aware of the limits of that quest for fulfillment, an awareness that has been heightened by a growing realization of the limits of natural resources.
So, when that rush for fulfillment smashes against the wall of reality, people end up turning inward. In his book Hypermodern Times, French philosopher and social thinker Gilles Lipovsky said, "A desire we are aware of, but cannot satisfy, leads to frustration, then a turning inward and a sort of hypersensitivity to everything that might impede us."
And when you throw in a few other factors like social media and a fear-mongering press, not to mention the attitude of some politicians, then the urge to reject others is not far behind.
Corporate life is no exception. Employees are obviously people, and social trends naturally spill over into the workplace. Some firms end up trying to cater to employees' quality of life expectations, whatever it takes. As a result, a lot of people have come to take occupational wellness as a given, which has led to an opportunistic proliferation of trends involving workplace happiness and self-fulfillment.
Some quality of life initiatives in the workplace seem to really miss the point, by focusing more on well-being and issues related to work than on the work itself.
To put it bluntly, when you go too far in cultivating individuality, perhaps through a heavy-handed approach or with honest but naive intentions, to the point where you inflate an already overblown self, it isn't surprising to see cohesion crumble.
Between the I and the we. Between the obvious need for identity and an equally pressing need to belong, one person's gain is another person's loss. When all's said and done, what we all need to grasp, individually and as a group, is that instead of turning inward and putting up walls, we just need to accept that the more of us there are, the more we need to learn to get along.
And in companies, learning or relearning how to get along and to live together depends on two things. On the one hand, respect for others, and, on the other, respecting what it is that brings people together in the first place. In this case, the company and its business plan.
To recap, efforts to get along and to live together in the corporate environment are being undermined by social trends. An insatiable appetite for well-being that flies in the face of real-life limitations, leading to frustration, inward-looking attitudes, and a rejection of others, which makes it increasingly difficult to maintain harmony. We need to learn to live together again. In companies, that means two things. 1. Our ability to get along is contingent on respect for others. 2. We are bound by our respect for what unites us. In this case, the company. Is that right?
Exactly right. Way to make a long story short.
Story RH, the podcast that makes a long story short.